all the days to admit you're still in love with your ex, it must have taken great courage for Miss Goskirk, wouldn't you say?
Well, it would have saved a fair bit of heartache if she told me sooner.
You seem to have a history of troubled relationships with women, Mr. Harris. Would that be fair to say?
I don't think so.
Starting with your mother? Is it not correct that you told Miss Goskirk that you were estranged from your mother, that your mother wanted nothing to do with you?
I don't see how that's...
But the truth was that you froze your mother out of your life because you didn't approve of her loose morals.
It's a bit more complicated than that.
No doubt. Do you have a problem with women, Mr. Harris? What is it, perhaps a need for control, a need to quell your feelings of inadequacy?
Your Honor.
Do all women make you angry, Mr. Harris? Or just those who have the misfortune to remind you of your mother?
Your Honor, I question the relevance.
In your interview, you stated that you threatened to tell Miss Goskirk's ex that she was back on painkillers. What exactly did you mean by that?
Well, Rona had a history of drug addiction. I had reason to believe that she was using again.
But as we've seen, tests showed no traces of opiates in her system. How do you explain that?
I can't. But then, I'm not a medical professional.
In your interview, you also claimed after this threat that Miss Goskirk flew at me like a lunatic. Could you describe this event? Oh, I appreciate your confusion. I must admit, I'm rather confused myself, given that you've chosen to not once reference this alleged incident whilst on the stand. Is it because it never happened?
Well, I'm here to defend myself, not to make accusations.
Whatever happened, what we do know is that after Miss Goskirk told you she was still in love with her ex, she used a taxi. Do you know where the taxi driver took her?
Yes, to the police station.
Did you also know that this taxi firm she used makes a log of all journeys? You see, the interesting thing is, Miss Goskirk's taxi picked her up at approximately 4:10 that afternoon. And yet, according to witness testimony, you were still at the wedding reception at around 4. Does that sound right, Mr. Harris?
I don't know.
According to your version of events, that would give you a time frame of around 10 minutes to return home and then have the kind of conversation you claim occurred between you and Miss Goskirk. Does that really sound plausible to you?
Well, I didn't keep a time log.
Well, if you did, you'd realize that the sequence of events as you've presented them don't really stack up, do they?
I told you the truth. I can't account for other people's versions of events.
It's a fact that Miss Goskirk's taxi was logged at just before 4 o'clock, when several accounts, including your own, placed you at the reception. It's a fact that the taxi driver found Miss Goskirk bruised and shaking 10 minutes later. How do you account for that?
She must have called the taxi before I got back. Maybe she was planning on leaving before she told me the truth.
But she didn't, did she? At least not according to your version of events.
No.
Mr. Harris, there simply wasn't enough time for your version of events to have realistically occurred. Wouldn't you agree? You forced yourself on Miss Goskirk before you left for the reception. By the time you returned, she'd gone. Isn't that the truth, Mr. Harris? I put it to you that you're lying to the court.
I'm not the one who's lying here.
No more questions?
I'd like to ask you a little more about the defendant's stag night, if I may. Would you describe it as being a wild affair?
He definitely had Pierce on the ropes back then.
Maybe. But we're far from home and dry.
Nobody can see him for what he is.
I wouldn't be so sure. His own mother didn't.
Maybe me and Tess. And what happened between us, maybe that's what pushed him over the edge.
Whatever's made him like this, it's been in him a long time.
Just a few drinks and a bit of telly. Then we nipped to the local.
The Woolpack pub, where Miss Goskirk's hen night was being held at the same time. Rather unusual turn of events, wouldn't you say?
I suppose.
No more questions?
Any re-examination?
Yes, Your Honour. Can you remember whose idea it was to go to the Woolpack pub the night of Mr. Harris's stag do?
It was mine.
Thank you, Mr. King. That's all.